If the world was suddenly thrust into a state of disorder by some major cataclysmic event, would people see the value in trying to keep the clocks going? Just how important is time in knitting the fabric of our modern world? What relationship does timekeeping have to civility and the rule of law? In this video, I'd like to explore the role of time in maintaining the social order, and how without loyalty to this taken for granted invention, that the world would sooner than later drift into chaos. In physics, there's a concept called entropy, and it's the principle that all things tend towards disorder and chaos. That all systems, including social systems in all civilizations, eventually will collapse. And it's only time that reminds us that they ever existed. Time is the metronome of the metropolis. The metronome helps the musician keep time so that he might produce amazing compositions and works of art. Without the metronome of time to see man's activities through, just like music, it becomes discordant, out of harmony, disordered, and inevitably the death of civilization as we know it. You can show your support for the After the Collapse series by liking, commenting, and sharing this video on other social media platforms. Enjoy the video. The clock is a reminder that time is of the essence. It subtly disciplines us. It reminds us of the finite aspect of our lives, that with every tick and every talk, we realize that the end of some period is approaching. It reminds us, in fact, of our mortality and that someday we all will die. As much as we obey time religiously, whether it's going to work, arriving on time for an event, or making plans to maximize the use of our time, chronometry in our modern world is essential to our survival. Without a system to keep time, we are at a supreme disadvantage in our ability to efficiently plan and prepare for the unknowns of the future and fend off the colossal beast that is the unpredictability of nature. Timekeeping provides the framework of our modern civilization. Without it, the synchronized symphony of events that make up our advanced technological world would quickly fall out of line and become disordered and dissonant. Everything in our modern world runs on borrowed time. Time is the invisible guideline of the metropolis. For example, everything runs on electricity, and the administration of the electrical grid is a series of binary circuits which is balanced and calculated in the fabric of the chronology of seconds, minutes, and hours that we've created. Without some measure of time, we are at an extreme disadvantage in terms of how technologically sophisticated our society can become. And were the clocks ever to stop ticking, our grip over nature would quickly slip, and our society would soon descend into chaos. It is time, or our acknowledgement of time, which regulates our higher order civil practices. This enables us to predict the future with some degree of certainty. It's the invisible glue that binds us all together. Not too long after a large-scale catastrophic scenario, people would begin to lose track of time, because time has its significance in the grid while the grid is up. It's the glue that binds the grid together. Without it, our actions are pretty much dictated by the whims of nature. Now, time provides structure and directs the activities of many people's lives. Without the social norms that commonly accompany the different times of day, well, 3 a.m. becomes no different than 3 p.m. When it's all about survival, one moment is the same as any other. Now, time dictates everything from breakfast, lunch, dinner, when you sleep, when you wake, when you sow your seeds, when you're going to rendezvous with people. It facilitates the rationing of your resources. It allows you to mark patterns in nature. It allows you to plan for your family planning. It allows us to measure gestational periods. It allows us to navigate and coordinate an offensive. It tells us when to start doing something and when to quit doing it. Without time, these activities become far more fluid and organic because time necessarily dissects nature's processes into these little bits. In its absence, there is but a continuous, uninterrupted flow of life that is only demarcated by the climaxing of natural events. When the salmon stop running, when the leaves start to turn, when I feel a rumble in my stomach, when the geese start migrating south, etc., etc. Many are going to find it challenging to live in such a spontaneous, fly-by-night world which is totally unstructured as it is by time right now, because we've been so assimilated into a world where there are rules, temporal rules, for every single activity that we do. The structuring of time in Western society is totally subjective. For instance, breakfast, lunch, and supper are all meant to correspond to the average 9 to 5 workday. Even the days of the week and the weekend are all based around our system of labor that has everybody working for the sake of the weekend. Aside dates of meteorological significance like the equinox and the solstice, the dates and times that we currently find value in are pretty much subjective and relative to whatever culture you're in. In the absence of the grid, there is no breakfast, lunch, and supper. There just is times to eat. And in fact, the natural mode of consumption of almost any species on the planet is not to eat at set times, rather to graze throughout the day or to eat when food presents itself. So it's far more chaotic than our current system will sustain. What we use in the Western world, and for the majority of the world, is called the Gregorian calendar. And it's seen as the holy grail of time, but it's just one calendrical system which has been devised by human beings. There are dozens of ways to tell time, and depending on who you ask, you'll get 10 different responses for what year it actually is. So how we've organized our time and the routines that we've gotten ourselves into are all based around the grid. When the grid collapses, all of our routines and behaviors are correspondingly going to change as well. Our success as a species relies on our ability to some degree of accuracy predict the future. Knowing when the sun will rise is a useful thing to know. Knowing when the seasons will change is imperative for the survival of any species that seeks to grow beyond the level of agrarian society. We need to know when we have to plant the seeds. Knowing the days and leap years would be the most critical practice for the survivors to commit themselves to. It's very important that if there ever was a large-scale collapse, that immediately people take note of what day it is and make sure that with good discipline they mark off the days of whatever calendars they have. Having an awareness of these routines and rhythms of nature, this has allowed us to develop a complex society around these universal physical and biological laws. Giving time a number exponentially increased man's ability to evolve into a technologically advanced civilization, far beyond the simple celestial predictions of the analog astronomy of the empires of antiquity. Time permeates every aspect of the technological apparatus that enwraps us, and when the grid goes down, the system of time that we have created will die with it. Now, if we look at time and our evolution, the clock is much like the pole which balances man along the tightrope of our evolutionary pathway. I'm going to say that again. The clock is like the pole which balances man along the tightrope of our evolutionary pathway. Time ensured that everybody came to work with regularity and that the cycles of man would be practiced with great precision, allowing us to erect highly sophisticated systems into our society. As we evolved, so did the science of timekeeping. It became more sophisticated. What began as a sundial and obelisk is now an atomic clock. Most primitive modes of timekeeping may see a re-emergence after the collapse, after everybody's watches run out of battery power. Sundials, obelisks, and water-powered escapement mechanisms, even hourglasses, may be what we come to rely on until the lost art form of mechanical timekeeping reemerges. Now, I want to quickly talk about the relativity of time, and based on my experience working in forestry and remote work camps, I can tell you that it is very easy to lose track of what day it is with no point of reference. Human beings are quickly going to adopt whatever agreed upon system of telling time that presents itself. So for instance, even after a week of me doing a 4-day on, 1-day off rotation, so that's where you work 4 days, you take 1 day off, and that's what you do, you back and forth, 4 days on, 1 day off. Your mind eventually ceases to find the value in knowing what day of the conventional week it is. So Monday becomes no different than Wednesday. There is no such thing as the weekend at that point. Now, this is the aspect of time that is relative. Monday is replaced with day 1, and your week becomes a 5-day week. Once again, it's all relative. Now, after a large-scale disaster where our routines are drastically interrupted, it's very likely that the perception of time is going to quickly change, because calling a day Monday or Sunday is not relevant to that sort of world. After the collapse, there are no weekends. There are no hump days. Every day is hump day. There are not even any holidays, of course. There's potentially no end to the week that never is. It's safe to say that the week won't survive. No pun intended. Interestingly, the markers of time may well be the decomposition of man's artifacts. Getting back to the concept of entropy, the creations of man will begin to decay the moment we stop maintaining them. And of course, if the grid were to collapse, everything is going to start decaying, degrading, and moving into a state of disorder. Buildings are going to crumble. Roads are going to begin to crumble, and nature is going to start to take back what man has created. The breakdown of the old world may come to be a very reliable imperial dating system of sorts. Nature has a tendency to veil its decay with a constant replenishment of new life. So you have leaves that fall, they die, they wither away into dust, and they're quickly overtaken by new leaves. And this is constantly happening, so you can barely ever see accumulation of decay. But man's dead creations are going to decompose and erode for hundreds, if not thousands of years. They're going to wither away and splinter into dust before that space is reclaimed by the grass and trees. The entropy of the dying world then may well become the post-apocalyptic atomic clock of sorts. How long has a building been uninhabited, as indicated by the layers of dust, just like rings of a tree? How deep are these footprints? How tall is the grass that protrudes through the cracks in the crumbling sidewalk? This will be the new sign to be read by the post-apocalyptic tracker. Seeing the signs will become a skill that is necessarily mastered by anyone who wishes to survive in a world without time. The clock on the wall is a stark reminder of all that we've created and all that we have to lose. With every tick and every talk, it beats us into submission. It beats the animal out of us. As much as the purpose of time is to let us know when now is, nothing ironically makes us more out of touch with the now than time itself. Without time and all its commitments, man quickly loses himself in the moment. And as romantic as it might be to immerse oneself in one's current experience, irrespective of the past depressions and future consequences of our actions, this state of living in the now is not sustainable. And of course, it forgoes our higher cognitive capabilities in exchange for the sensitivities of living in the moment. It is in our forebrains and our ability to project in our anxieties and predictions of the future, and our ability to ruminate on the past, and the interplay between these two mental states that fuels our ability for creativity and knowledge and sets us apart from the animals that we will surely become in the absence of our honoring of time. Time provides us a common language for the execution of our higher level thought processes, and when the clock stops ticking, everyone reverts to living in the present, as their survival is going to depend on it. It's this subservience to time is what muzzles the beast within man. It's what tames him. In its absence, the beast is necessarily unleashed as we become more in tune with the current moment than ever before. When our clocks stop, the past and the future then cease to exist, at least on paper, and we become immersed in the immanency of our world, indiscernible from the chaos abound. In our contemporary world, everything is moving so fast. When people say time is speeding up, it's because we have less and less of it to spare just to exist without any distractions. In fact, boredom has become a lost art form. Technology has made it nearly impossible to go a moment without being entertained or occupied or distracted, and as such, we blaze through our lives. Even the moments that we are supposed to be enjoying, we now waste by taking pictures of them on our smartphones. We do this so we can re-experience what should have been an intense, 3D fulfilling experience. Now we re-experience that as some flat, two-dimensional, detached experience. Things are moving at a more accelerated rate than ever before, and when we hit the wall of total collapse of society as we know it, everything goes from 100 miles an hour to immediate zero. People will mark the days off from their calendars from when the old world drifted away, with the hopes, perhaps, of that world returning. Many will hold desperately to the idea that help is on the way and mark the days off as they go by. And then one day, Monday will become but another day, and you will forget nor care what label defines your day. There will be no value in doing so, in labeling it as Monday, as you'll be preoccupied with the tasks of survival, and the chronological system of old will lose its meaning, and it simply won't be useful anymore, so people will stop using it. When the clock finally stops ticking, it will be like an acceptance of this new lawless world. Those who cling to some agreed upon system of timekeeping may benefit from it, but they also may be clinging to false hope. And it comes to mind the character named Dale in The Walking Dead. He was the moral compass of the group. He kept hope alive in the timepiece that he had. He was the voice of that group's humanity, and his watch was a reminder of what he had to lose. There was a scene where some of the characters were asking Dale why he kept his watch, and he read a quote by William Faulkner, which reads, "A father said to his son in giving him this watch, 'I give to you the mausoleum of all hope and desire. I give it to you not that you may remember time, but that you might forget it now and then, for a moment, and not spend all of your breath trying to conquer it. Because no battle is ever won,' he said. 'They are not even fought. The field only reveals to man his own folly and despair, and victory is an illusion of philosophers and fools.'" Interestingly enough, when the character Dale died in the story, it was around the same time when Rick told the group that this was no longer a democracy. And from that point forward, you had seen a gradual diminishing of the group's humanity, and they became more ruthless, and necessarily so, as the world became more ruthless as the clock died. Everyone began looking like enemies to everybody else. Time is what arrests the beast within man. It constantly lurks behind him. It reminds him of the consequence of his actions. It's a stark reminder of the morality and the rule of law. So long as the clock ticks, there remains the potential for justice sometime. Time is justice. As had been said before, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But what about when seconds, minutes, days, weeks, months, and years, and perhaps decades no longer count? See, time is what holds villains and tyrants accountable. It's what officiates an incident, which is why in all our courtrooms, most statements begin with placing the event within some temporal context. Time is hope, and people hold on to hope. The further removed we become from the rule of law, the more our world will descend into uncertainty and banditry. Time is an affirmation of certainty. It's an affirmation of order. It predicts and alerts us to our obligations and all of the morals that we've come to associate with those things. It is something we all agree on, whether we are good or bad-spirited people, everybody must agree that 4 o'clock is 4 o'clock. Once that agreement is gone, we are simply good and bad people. Now, perhaps there are some spiritual benefits to the clock stopping. For without time and its commitments, our senses become more attuned to what's going on in the present, to live in the proverbial now, as it's called. Our visual and auditory acuity will necessarily heighten. The more imminent our survival, the less we can worry about what happens tomorrow, and next week, and this summer, and on our birthday, and next year, and so on and so forth. We will be fully immersed in the moment. Perhaps time stopping won't be all that bad for the human race. Perhaps we will live more in the now than ever before. We have become quite alienated from living in the moment with this whole keeping up with the Joneses mentality that we live. Everybody is in a mad rush to the future without giving two shits about the experience they're having right now. Any event you go to where people are preoccupied with filming the event without experiencing it is proof of this. So in spite of the tumultuous nature of shit hits the fan, the upside, perhaps, is that many of us will be granted the experience of feeling alive once again that we currently seek via other forms of entertainment like video games, sports, post-apocalyptic fiction, and reality survival TV. Not caring about what we will do 5, 10, 15 years from now, or even before we die, but only caring about how we will survive another day, another hour, and in the heat of the battle when we are more in our own skin than the sanctity of this world will ever permit another second. Without any of the distractions of time, be it anxiety about our future or depression about the past, we are free to focus on the totality of our capability in the here and now and explode with vitality and power through whatever is in our way, like a rhinoceros charging through the Serengeti, or a gazelle meekly cowering under the wrath of a lioness. Whatever mode we operate on, one thing is for certain: we would be more alive than this social incubator will ever permit us today. We are slaves to time. Without it, we are free. But with great freedom comes great responsibility. So be ready. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.